Hi, so I'm Robert and this is the Pencast problem. So for part 1, we have to, using the Taylor rule, calculate the implied federal funds rate target. So we have I equals 2% plus 8% plus 0.5%. We do that. 8% minus 2%, and then plus 0.5. and then 1%, and so that equals to 10% plus 3% plus 0.5%, and that equals out to 13.5. Yeah, 13.5%. That means that the so 13.5 is the implied federal funds rate target. Federal funds rate target. And then for part two we have, what is the gap between the rule implied rate and the actual decision rate suggest about the Fed and weighing its options. So the actual one was 0.25 to 0.55. So I think the gap between these was the Fed was highly cautious and just wanted to go up in small increments to avoid instability within the market, because unpredictable things can happen if you just have it from a low just all the way up to a 13.5% type of thing. That could have a lot of instability in the market and cause a lot of problems. So then part 3, we have using the average of these two forecasts as your expected inflation figure, calculate the Taylor rule implied rate and how does forecast uncertainty complicate a strict rule based approach to policy. So for the numbers, it was 5% and 11%. And since you do that, you take the average of 5 plus 11 and you divide it by 2, and that equals out to 8%. So since it says 8%, the Taylor rule also remains 13.5%. But for forecast uncertainty, it complicates the policy because relying on one number when there's high variation can lead to errors if the number deviates from the average. Because if you take the average of that and it is at the lower end or the higher end, then that can really mess up things within the market, or just a lot of things in life with how that can mess up money and stuff like that. And then so part 4 has conclude your memo with a recommendation should the Fed follow the Taylor rule mechanically in this environment or exercise dissertation. Identify at least one real constraint the Fed faced early 2022 that a simple rule would not account for, and explain how it affects your recommendation. So I think the Fed should exercise discretion because this rule can ignore certain restraints of market validity. And then in early 2022, the Fed faced constraint of forward guidance as they had the need to avoid certain market disruptions after they had a long period of almost zero rates. They had to go up. And that was the Pencast problem. Thank you.